me tonight. Thank y'all, thank y'all, thank y'all. Latanya, thank you for joining in with me on tonight. Tamika, thank you for joining in with me on tonight. Moniqua, thank you so much for joining in with me on tonight. I see Moniqua, Tamika tagging a lot of people in. Thank you so much. Bird, thank you for joining in with me on tonight. Charlene Rainey, thank you so much for joining in with me on tonight. And Markeisha Stewart, thank you so much for joining in with us on tonight. It's truly a blessing to see each and every one of you. That's on here. Good evening, Monique. Good evening, good evening, good evening. At this time, you all go ahead and share the video, like the video, love the video, whatever you could do. Go ahead and tag someone in on the video and let them know that we're uh on What's the Word podcast tonight. Y'all give me a minute. Y'all, thank y'all so much for tagging people in. I believe that the word that God has given me will truly be a blessing for each and every one of you all on tonight. As I told you, as I promised you all, I was going to be talking about David on tonight. But before I do that, I want to thank each and every one of you who joined in with us on the podcast on yesterday. Just to hear the vision that me and my husband had is truly a blessing. To have people hang out with you, just to hear the mission and the mission statement that God has us on. So I would like to give each and every one of you a big hand on tonight for joining in with us. We really, really, really appreciate that. What you did for us on yesterday. Um, as I told each and every one of you all, let's see if we have anybody else on here because I just want to greet everybody before I get into the message. Y'all, I'm a little blind, so give me a minute. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. uh Trinity Line, thank you so much for joining in with us on tonight. Trinity, I think this is your first time. It's a pleasure to have you on with us. I truly appreciate you being on here with us tonight. um Tasha Washington, thank you so much, Tasha, for joining in with us on tonight. Y'all, Monique, y'all, thank y'all for tagging the people in. As y'all come in, I'll try to recognize who's on here, and I'll try to tag. I'll try to acknowledge you as you come on here. Let me go to my page and see if I have anyone on here because I don't want to miss anybody. I don't think I got anybody on here at this time, but let me go ahead and get started. Um, I had put a title up here called In Too Deep. I told you I was going to talk about David on tonight. Y'all, I found out some interesting things about David as I began to study about David on this week. Now, we all know that David is the young boy who, Jeffrey, thank you so much for hanging out with us on YouTube tonight. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We all know David as the young boy who slayed the giant. Remember, David was the one who killed the Philistine giant Goliath with the slingshot and the rock. But what I also found out is sometimes some of the most what makes you successful is what you go through in life. And as I've been saying, Pierre, thank you so much for joining in with us on tonight. As I've been saying, David is famous for a lot of things. We know David said he's a man after God's own heart. David wrote the books, some of the books of Psalm. And what I found out about David, David did not have it easy. We see the easy part of David's life, but I'm going to walk you through some of the hardest parts of David's life. But it shows you that David was in with God so deep that he never threw in the towel, no matter what the challenge was in his life. And I began to look and I said, sometimes you get so deep into stuff that you can't turn back. But one thing David began to show us is that when you get in something deep, you have to remember you got to turn to God and you got to give it all to God when you're going through things that you can't handle. So what I began to find out about David is, David, we know David as the young boy, as I said, who slayed the giant with the rock and a slingshot. But prior to that, David was a young boy. He had many brothers. He was Jesse's son. And what happened with David was a young boy, but the father sent David to tend to his flock. So David had to work in the field. Now, as I began to do some studying, as I began to listen to people talk about David, some says that David was kind of like the underdog. That's why he was sent in the field to tend to the flock. And some say that David was trustworthy to his father. That's why he was sent to work in the field. But one thing I come to realize is sometimes you have to look at life and says, where is your place? And as I begin to look at David as a young boy, he's working in the field. But do you know David was almost attacked by a tiger and a bear as he worked in the field? So some say, some theologians say that the reason David was sent in the field to work because his daddy had did something, and he was hoping that if David was attacked, that he could cover up what he did through David being attacked, so he could get rid of David and he would not have to remember what he had did. So as I began to look, and I say, we always talk about how David was the young boy who slayed the giant, but we never talk about the full story of David. So now I'm looking at David's life and I say, wow, David was a young kid. And out of all the children that Jesse had, Jesse picks his youngest child and he sends his youngest child in the field by himself to tend to the flock. And while David is tending to the flock, he is approached by a tiger and a bear, which he turns around, he defeats the tiger and bear. But one thing, it shows me that as a young child, God will have you in training and putting you in a position so that when the next obstacle comes, you'll already be in the right place and the right space to do what you need to do. So as I begin to look at David, so David comes from the field, but check it out. Remember when they were talking about this giant who was taunting the Philistines, remember David came around and David said, listen, I can take this giant down. Remember Saul looked at David like, what do you mean? You're a young boy. You can't take this giant down. Check this out. David brothers also started looking at him real funny, like, what you doing here? You should be in the field somewhere working. So the brothers started talking down to David, and David was saying, listen, I know what I'm doing. I've been working in the field, and I had to fight a tiger and a bear, so I've already been in training. If I defeated the tiger and the bear, then I know this Philistine is nothing for me to defeat. But the brothers started looking at David like, listen, you need to go back where you came from. But one thing, check it out. The brothers were scared to touch the giant, but David had already been in training for the battlefield. God will have you set apart from people, but he'll be training you so that when the next battle comes, you'll already be ready for the mission. Remember, we talked about God sometimes separates you because he has you in training. Remember, he separated Joseph from his family. David's father separated him from the family and put him in the field. But one thing they didn't realize, David had favor with God, and that David was being trained by God because David trusted God. So now I'm looking, and then it goes down. David is now, he volunteers to take this giant on, which was a Philistine, which was Goliath. So now David goes to battle with the giant, and he takes the slingshot and he takes the rock and he knocks the giant down. Now at this point, once David kills the giant, Now remember, he went to the army of Saul. Saul starts to resent David because this lady starts singing a song about Saul defeated, I think it was what was it? 1,000, and David killed 10,000. So now Saul gets real resentful with David. Now check it out. We know David as the giant slayer. We know David as the person who defeated Goliath, but we don't know David in the midst of the trials and tribulations. So now Saul starts to get real upset with David, and Saul wants to kill David because he feels like David has did something that he hasn't done. So now David is in his house, and David is working for Saul, and he's actually Saul's his master, and he's taking care of Saul, and he's playing this instrument because David was a musician, and normally he could play this music to calm Saul down. Now Saul is upset. The music that used to calm Saul down, Saul now can't be calmed down by the music because he's let his rage get the best of him. So now he begins to throw an axe at David, and in Saul's mind, Saul is saying that, listen, if I throw this axe at David, I'll pin him to the wall and kill him. And David is looking at him like, hold up, wait a minute, what's going on? Saul, I look at you as a father figure. Now check this out. David looked at Saul as a father figure. Now Saul is starting to reject him. Now his own father put him in the field and left the other brothers in the house while David goes and works in the field. And David is almost attacked by this lion and this bear. So David is rejected twice. So David leaves his father's house where he's almost destroyed, and he goes to Saul's house thinking that, listen, I'm doing right by y'all, but everybody I try to do right, wrong comes with it. So now he leaves his father's house. He goes to Saul's house. Saul gets angry because he's jealous of David now, because David took the Philistine down, and now he begins to start throwing axes at David. And in his mind, he's saying, I'm going to act like it's a mistake. But in the back of my mind, I've turned against David because David was doing something that I couldn't do. So if it hits him, then I succeed. But if it don't, he tells David, listen, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. So David then starts to realize that Saul really isn't playing with him no more. And David realizes, listen, Saul, your son is my best friend. And I could kill you because I've already been trained. I was already in the field in training. I've already defeated the tiger and the bear, and I've also defeated the giant. So I know I can defeat you, but because God has a calling on your life, I wouldn't dare do anything to disappoint God because God called you. So David says, listen, I'm going to leave Saul's house. So David begins to run. And as David begins to run and he hides in a cage. And I'm just going to summons it up so I can get to the point. David hides in a cage. And as David hides in a cage, Saul ends up looking for David. And while he's looking for David, he ends up not knowing David is in a cage. He comes in a cage to use the bathroom. But David is standing right there. Could have took Saul out, but he never took Saul out. He just let Saul live. So anyway, David ends up, check this out. Some of your greatest success is going to be when you work under pressure. So now David ends up leaving, and he ends up going into the Philistines' camp. Now check it out. The Philistine was Goliath, and that was Goliath. It was his city. David is so fed up and so disappointed and tired of running from the people that supposed to love him, that he goes into the enemy's territory. Now, I just told you, some of your greatest success is going to be when you're working under pressure. So now David goes into the enemy's camp because David is tired. So what he does when he goes into this enemy camp, he starts to talk to the leader of the army, and he tells him, listen, if you let me stay here, I'm going to join your army. Now check it out. We may ask the question, how did David defeat the Philistine? But now he's become a part of the Philistine city. David has also made a covenant with the Philistines that if they fight, because the Philistines know David history. Check it out. Some of your greatest success is going to be when you work under pressure. Now, remember, I caught something. David is saying that, listen, he says in the 23rd Psalm, it tells you that God will prepare a table in the presence of your enemies. So now David has gone into the enemy's camp and he has made a deal. He has made a covenant with the enemies and saying, listen, I know that I killed the giant. I know that I slayed Goliath, that he was a Philistine, and you all are Philistines too. But listen, I surrender. I give up. I'm tired of running. The people that's supposed to love me, they trying to kill me. So if I can't beat them, then I might as well join you. Because see, I don't want to hurt Saul, and I don't want to have altercations with my family. So what I'll do is let me hook up with y'all. I've already proven myself to who and showed y'all what I can do. So the general of the army tells David, listen, okay, I'm gonna let you come on in. But what you got to do is when we fight, you got to promise that you'll fight with us. David says, listen, I'm tired of fighting with the people that I love. So why not fight with my enemies? So David says, listen, I'm so tired. Let me make a deal with my enemies and I'll fight with y'all. So David makes a deal with the Philistines and he tells them, listen, I'm going to be on y'all team right now. Because listen, I understand that back in my own city, I'm not wanted. So let me join y'all at this time. So I'm going to go on, and this is where I'm going to pick up at 1 Samuel 30. It says, David and his men reached Ziklag on the third day. Now the Amalekites had raided the Nebagites, and in Ziklag, y'all can't see, they had attacked Ziklag and burned it. And it says that, and had taken captive the women and all that were in it, both young and old. So now David is fighting with these Philistines. Check it out. He's fighting with his enemies. But little do he know, you got to go back. It's a story that Saul was supposed to do some killing on God's behalf, and Saul didn't do it. So Saul left these enemies behind. And remember, David was once in the army of Saul. So what happened is, because David has went to the enemies, these enemies that David had when he was with Saul, they come back while he's fighting with the Philistines. They take everything away from them. They take the wives, they take the children, because David had an army, because now the people that follow David is now on the battlefield with David. But while David is out fighting, they come and they take captive the women and all that were with them, both young and old. So they take everybody. They take all the men's wives, they take David's wives, they take the children. So they take everybody's that's with them, and then they burn the city up. When David comes back with his men and they come back to Ziklag, they find that the city had been destroyed and everything that they own is gone. Now, we're talking about David. We're talking about the giant slayer. We're talking about the one that killed the tiger and the bear. But David has conflict now. David has decided to join with the enemy, forgetting about the enemy that he had when he was in the army of Saul. Now his enemies from the other side come up against him while he's fighting with the other enemies. Talking about working under pressure. So now David comes back and everything is gone. Now, let me tell you something. Now David is greatly distressed, because guess what? These men that were fighting with David, now they talking about stoning David. You talking about some problems. We always highlight David knocking the giant down, but we don't highlight that David has some ups and downs, changes and turnarounds in his life. But one thing David said is that I'm a man after God's own heart. So David begins to cry with these men, and they cried until they couldn't cry no more, because now these men is looking at David like, hold on. We joined your team fighting with you. We come back. We done lost everything. What you gonna do? Because guess what? Working under pressure is when you're most successful. Let me tell you something. Now the spotlight is on David, because David, you have defeated a giant. You have killed the tiger and the bear. Be careful when the spotlight is on you, because everybody is looking at you now. They no longer see you as the giant slayer. Now they talking about killing you, because everything that they had is gone. So God began to show me that sometimes you in so deep, you can't do nothing but trust God when your back is up against the wall. So now, these men is telling David, listen, we was out there on the battlefield with you. What you gonna do? Our wife gone, the kids gone. These people done came and destroyed this whole city. You took us into the enemy's territory to fight with the enemies. Now who gonna fight for us? So now these people looking at David basically saying, listen, bro, what you gonna do? You gonna do something quick, or just like they took ours, we finna take your life. So David says, hold up. David says, listen, he says, I have to encourage myself at this point in time in my life. David says, I understand that I've been running and I'm constantly running. I'm running from, sometimes you can't run from everything that's chasing you. Some battles you're going to have to stand up and fight. Because remember, David ran from the city that he belonged to and ran and cut a deal into the enemy's territory. Now David is working under pressure and he's greatly distressed. And these people are like, listen, you killed the giant, you killed the bear and the tiger, but you better do something and do something fast, because you better get back what we have lost. So now David says, listen, they say David was in great distress. It says the men were talking about stoning him. Each one of them was bitter in spirit. Now they mad. Check it out. The first time you do something wrong, they forget about all that good that you did. Good just went out the window. Be careful when you can do good. Be careful when you good, only when you can do good. But turn around and let something happen and people gonna show you their true color. I'm talking about working under pressure. So now David says, listen, he says, let me start to, David says, listen, I'm in distress too. They took everything that I got. They got my wives. They got my children as well. But what I'm going to do is I need to start encouraging myself. See, David says, I'm not going to discourage myself about what I've did in the past. See, I ran and I took y'all with me to the enemy's territory, but I can't get discouraged now. Why? Because I'm in too deep. And if I'm in too deep, I got to do what I know how to do. Listen, David is saying, I'm walking in the valley of the shadow of death right now. Because guess what? These men are looking at me like, if you don't do something, we about to kill you. David says, listen, the Lord is my shepherd. See, David says, listen, I got to encourage myself. So David starts saying, listen, I'm walking in the valley of the shadow of death. But David says, I also remember that the Lord said he'll be my rod, my staff, and my comforter. So now David, he says, listen, he tells Abimelech, the priest, he says, go bring me an ephod. Abimelech brings it to him, and David goes in and he inquires of the Lord. See, David says, I know that when I get in trouble, I got to inquire of God, because God trained me when I was a little boy, when my father put me in the field to work the field and allowed the other sons to stay inside the house. God was putting me in training for such a time like this. See, we don't understand that when we start going through trials and tribulations, that God has already trained us how to walk through some of these situations and circumstances. But we also need to be reminded that we must go back to God for instructions, because if we trust in the Lord with all our heart and lean not to our own understanding, acknowledge God in all his ways, and he'll direct our path. So now David says, listen, I like this, y'all. He says, David goes and inquire of the Lord. He says, listen, God, he say, shall I pursue this raiding party? So first he says, listen, God, I got a question. He said, I'm in too deep. I can't turn around now. I got enemies that are with me now, because these men want to kill me, because they getting together and they talking about stoning me because they wife and they kids are gone. So I ain't got nobody that's rolling with me. And if I try to run back to the city, I got Saul and all those problems on my hand. So listen, God, let me ask you a question. Should I pursue this raiding army or not? Is what David said. David said, I got a question. He says, listen, God, I'm in too deep. I can't keep running from my past because me running has gotten me desperate. And by me getting desperate, I ran into my enemy's territory, God. And then I cut a deal with my enemies and I brought people along with me. Now the people are in trouble as well as me. So guess what? I got to do something to change the dynamics of what I have done. I got to fix this. So he says, listen, God, he says, should I pursue the party? He said, and will I overtake them? So David says, listen, God, I got a question. He said, I'm in so deep. I need to know, God, this time, if I go out there to pursue the party, will it turn out like it turned out with Goliath? This time, if I go out to pursue this raiding party, will it turn out like it turned out with the lion and bears? So God tells David, he says, listen, David, he said, you will currently overtake them and succeed in the rescue. So God says, listen, David, I want you to go forth. And I want you to go in and possess everything that they've taken from you. And you're going to get everything back that they've taken from you. So as I began to look and I began to study the life of David, and I began to look and I said, you know what? I said, wow, we always talk about David and he kills these lions. And we always talk about how he fights the tiger and bears, but David didn't have it easy. But David trusted in the Lord with all his heart and leaned not to his own understanding. See, God knew that David was a man after his own heart. Plus, God had favor on David because remember, y'all, I'm going to take y'all back. David was appointed king. David was in the field working when they sent Samuel to his daddy's house and says, listen, there's a king in that house. See, they overlooked David, but God never overlooked David. God says, listen, I got David in the field, but David is going to be the king that's going to fight the battles on my behalf. So as I began to look at the life of David, I said, wow, some of us have gotten ourselves in so deep. But what God is saying, you're not in deep enough that you can't turn around and ask me if this battle can be won. See, David realized that he had to trust in the Lord with all his heart and lean not to his own understanding. See, some of our greatest fights gonna be won when we fight by faith. See, David says, listen, I need to pray to God to see what God is trying to tell me. And based off of what the answer God gives me, he's gonna give me the green light. God says, go ahead, David. Go into the enemy's camp and you take back everything that they've taken back from you, What I come on here tonight to tell you all is sometimes when you in stuff so deep, keep trusting God. Because see, David had the spotlight on him. And I'm going to tell you something. See, when the spotlight is on you, because guess what, David? You took us into the enemy's territory. See, we done forgot all about all that good you done did until you took us to the enemy's territory. So now that the spotlight is on you, what you going to do? So God is saying, listen, people got the spotlight on you, seeing if you can do what you really say you can do. If you walk the walk that you say you walk with God, if you talk the talk that you say you talk with God, the people got the light shining on you. So guess what? God says, listen, because they looking at you to fail, David. They've seen all this good you've done based on the Lord on your side. But right now, they don't really believe that I'm still on your side. So what I want you to do right now, David, I want you to position yourself. And I want you to go into the enemy's territory. And I want you to take back everything that he has taken away from you. And matter of fact, go in and get what he has taken away from those people as well. Because they don't believe right now that the Lord is on your side. But when you come back, they're going to see something different. So now I'm looking at David and I say, wow, I said, David really was a man after God's own heart. because David now has his back up against the wall, and David is walking in the valley of the shadow of death, because like I said, these men are not playing with David. So David is now, but David remembers, I got a rod, I got a staff, and I got a comforter. I got somebody who will prepare me a place in the presence of my enemies. What God is saying to you all on tonight, y'all better go back into the enemy's camp and take back what he has taken away from you. Because let me tell you something, the enemy is crafty. What he did was he waited for David to go fight with his enemies in order to come and take everything away from David. But God says, listen, I am allowing you to go back in the enemy's camp and get back everything that he's taken from you. But notice David asked the question, listen, God, will it happen like it happened with the giant? Will I be able to do what I did then? And God says, listen, David, go in and pursue it all. See, in this life, sometimes we don't realize that the enemy has stolen our joy. And God is saying, I want you to go in and I want you to pursue every piece of joy that I've given you. Go in the enemy's camp and take back everything that I've given you. See, what we don't realize is sometimes the enemy has come in. Now, check it out. We looking at, we dealing with a society now where we deal with kids, and we wondering how. Now, I know I didn't raise my kids like that. How in the world did they get where they are? Well, it's just like the enemy did David. I'm going to wait until you not paying attention. See, you distracted because you helping your enemies fight. So the enemy is like this. See, once you get distracted, I can move. But what God is saying, listen, the enemy has taken some of your kids captive. You better go back and recover it all. How? Just like David. Listen, God, I'm in too deep. And before I let the streets get my child, I'm going to go in and pursue it all. Guess what, God? Listen, because I'm after your heart and you have allowed me to be part of your heart. God even says, listen, I know the thoughts that I think towards you. God says, listen, David, I've allowed you to get a glimpse of what I think towards you. So God says, listen, David, for I know the thoughts that I think towards you, thoughts of good and not of evil. God says, listen, go in and take it all. See, God says my ways are higher than your ways. My ways are higher than the heavens. So what God is saying, if I've given you a preview to think like me, then I need you to go in and pursue it all. See, the enemy is trying to take some of y'all health, but God says by his stripes, you are healed. See, the enemy is trying to take some of y'all minds, because if I can take your mind, then you can't go back and pursue anything, because I have everything that belongs to you. But as long as you keep your mind and God your heart, you can go and pursue everything that God had for you. Talking about working under pressure. See, David was under pressure in his life, but David was successful working under pressure. Why? Because David says, listen, I trust in the Lord with all my heart. I lean not to my own understanding. Listen, God, I'm acknowledging you in all my ways and you directed my path. So if I acknowledge you in all my ways and you direct my path, then I got to go to you and I got to say, listen, first of all, before I discourage myself, I'll encourage myself. So David said, let me start like this, because I'm on a mission. I'm going back to get everything that the devil took from me. So David says, listen, I'm on a mission. He said, and I got to encourage myself. He says, see, I got to get some strength while I'm going through. He says, but one thing I'm going to do, I'm not understanding what's going on. He said, but I trust you, God. He says, I'm going to inquire of you. Listen, God, can I go in and pursue what they took from me? God says, go in and get everything back that they've taken from you. And as David did what he did, David says, listen, not only do I got to go back and get what's mine, I got to go back and get what's theirs. Because let the truth be told, I'm the one that took them into the enemy's territory. And I'm the one that allowed the enemy to distract us because I'm fighting with the enemy, forgetting about the enemies that I already had chasing me. So David says, look, I own up to it. Y'all ain't got to stone me. I own up to it. It's my fault. I'm in too deep now. But I tell you this, I'm not going to sit here and cry with y'all no longer because I'm in so deep. I got to go to the Lord and I got to inquire of the Lord because I need guidance on what I'm doing right now. So God is saying sometimes when you in so deep, God is saying, come back and I'll guide you. See, David didn't throw in the towel because trials and tribulations came. Check it out. We know David as to be this giant slayer, but we also know that David had some giants that was about to kill him. But David says, listen, because I trust you, God, and I'm a man after your own heart, and you have allowed me to tap into the way you think. And because you allowed me to tap into the way you think, guess what? I'm going to go back and I'm going to inquire of instructions on you. See, the footsteps of a good man or woman are ordered by God. David says, I need you to order my steps right now. He says, listen, God, first of all, I've messed up. I admit it. I've got distracted. I got so desperate to the point where I ran from the enemy and I went into the enemy's camp, forgetting about the enemy that was already on my trail. But God, I want to make it right. And David says, listen, what I'm going to do, I'm going to make it right on all our behalf, if it be the Lord's will. He says, so what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to encourage myself. See, David had sat there with the men and he was crying too. But David says, listen, I can no longer cry over spilled milk. The damage has been done. Now what I need to do, I need to fix the damage that's already been done. So David says, listen, I'm sorry. I did bring y'all in with me. And I'm the reason that everything that y'all have is taken away from you. But I promise you, the God that I serve won't allow me to fail. The God that I serve won't allow me to knock a giant down and won't let me go into the enemy's camp and take back everything that belongs to me. Y'all, as I began to look at David's life, I got a little excited. Because I began to say, I said, David was in some stuff that was real deep. And sometimes, you know, we get ourselves into stuff that's so deep that we think there's no turning around from it. We think that we can't come back from this. But God's saying, if you trust me with all your heart, Taniqua Johnson, thank you so much for joining in. God's saying, if you trust me with all your heart and lean not to your own understanding, acknowledge me in all your ways and I will direct your path. I'll bring you out of anything that you think you can't get out of. And as I began to look, y'all, it was hard feeling to know that we get in positions and we feel like we can't come out of what we're in. We feel like the sickness is unto death, but the Bible says no, your sickness is not unto death. We feel like the giants is gonna take us over, but the Bible shows us that David knocked the giant down. We feel like depression is gonna make us lose our mind, but the Bible says if you have the same mind that's in Christ, you will keep your mind. See, sometimes we get into situations and our back is up against the wall, but God is saying, what I need you to do is I need you to encourage yourself. See, sometimes it starts with encouragement. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down beside green pastures. See, David had to start reminding God, God, you said you hasten to perform at your word. I trust you, Lord. You said no weapon that formed against me shall prosper. So David began to say, Marlon, thank you so much for joining in with us on tonight. So David began to say that I see the weapon that's forming. They came in while I was distracted. See, I jumped on the other side of the fence too fast. But while I was distracted, the enemy came in and took everything. So what David says is, listen, God, I understand that your word says that no weapon that formed against me shall prosper. So I see the weapon has formed against me, but I know it's not going to prosper. So God, what I need you to do is I need you to tell me, can I go in the enemy's camp and take back what they took from me? God says, go in. I'm giving you the green light. Pursue everything that's in there, get your stuff back and get their stuff back too. See, God is saying when you trust God with all your heart, God says, listen, if I let you knock down a giant, don't you think that I'm not going to let you go and get your stuff back and their stuff back too. And y'all, I begin to look at David and I say, you know, we got to be like David. We can't let everything squeeze us and everything shake us. We can't let our past rock us, because guess what? If David would have started going back to if I coulda, if I shoulda, if I woulda, David probably would have been running in circles. And guess what? Those men probably would have killed David, because guess what? Them men were looking for David for an answer right now. So David says, listen, God, I understand that I've messed up, but I ain't got time to play with my past. My future is at stake. So what I want you to do, God, is order my steps according to your will, not my will, according to your will. Because when I did my will, I messed around and hooked up with the Philistines, and I knew I had killed a giant that belonged to the Philistines, but because I was desperate, I hooked up with the Philistines. So God, what I need you to do is, I'm in too deep and I'm not going to turn around, because God, I trust you, because you're the same God that when my daddy put me in the field as a young boy and that tiger and that bear came up against me, you taught me how to fight as a baby. So now that I'm fighting with the tigers and the bears, I'm the same young boy that when that giant wouldn't stop taunting the Israelites, that I'm the same person that got a slingshot and I got a rock and I knocked the giant down. Why? So David says, listen, I look towards the hills from which cometh my help, because my help comes from God. See, I'm not going to turn around now because I'm in so deep. See, some of us have been in some stuff so deep and ain't realized how we came out of the enemy's territory. But somebody probably came and had to snatch you out. A lot of kids have been in stuff so deep, but God says, listen, mother, listen, father, I'm going to give you provision on how to go into the enemy's territory and get your daughter back. Listen, daughter, listen, father, listen, mother, I'm going to give you provision on how to go into the enemy's territory and get your son back. I need you to position yourself one more time, David, because if I did it back then, I'm the same God and I change it's not. I'm the same God of yesterday, today, and forevermore. My position don't change in your life because your problems come up against you. Listen, David, what I need you to do is position yourself. And when I tell you to pursue, I need you to pursue. See, some of us better get ready, because God is saying, listen, that problem that been pressing you, you're about to press it. See, David says, I've been pressed for too long. I got Saul trying to kill me. I got my brothers that really can't stand me. Then I got the Philistines telling me, because at a certain point after he stopped fighting with the Philistines, they told them to put David up at the Philistine army because they didn't trust him because the strength he had. David says, listen, I'm tired of fighting against my past. See, I ran from my past thinking I was going to the future, but I made a mess. But God says, listen, back up. You finna go back and change the whole dynamics of what just happened. So, y'all, with that being said, I thank each and every one of you all who joined in on here tonight. I seen a lot of people on here. I'm not ignoring y'all. I just be in my zone and I just be flowing as God instructs me to flow. And I just wanted to tell each and every one of y'all, see, y'all got to be like David, and first y'all got to start encouraging y'allself. Yeah, I understand what I'm going through. I understand that my back is against the wall and I'm going through trials and tribulation. And I also understand that depression is trying to creep up on me. And I also understand that when I went to the doctor that they gave me a bad report. But you better tell yourself, before I discourage myself, I'll encourage myself. Because guess what? When you go to the doctor and when your back is against the wall, you feel like I'm so far in deep, I don't know how to get out of this. So what David did, he says, first of all, he says, I'm going to encourage myself. Because when I go to the God that I serve, I'm not going to God with my head hanging low. Why? Because I'm looking towards the hills from which cometh my help. So if my help is coming from the God, from Lord, I got to have my head looking up. So I'm going to encourage myself and I'm going to pick myself up. Is what David says. He says, listen, y'all know sometimes you got to get up under the problem before it get up under you. See, sometimes we letting the problem get up under us instead of getting up under the problem. And God began to show me that when you start having problems up under your car, let's just say the brakes is going out. Most mechanics get up under the car in order to fix the brake. They don't stand on the top of the car to try to fix the brakes because the brakes is at the bottom. God is saying, I need you to get up under the problem. How you get up under the problem? You get up under the problem with the word. No weapon that formed against me shall prosper. By his stripes I am healed. If I keep trusting in the Lord with all my heart, I lean not to my own understanding. I'm a man, I'm a woman after God's own heart. See, God says, for he know the thoughts that he thinks toward me, thoughts of good and not of evil. God says, listen, I've allowed you to tap in my mind. God says, I've created you in the image of me. See, you got to get up under the problem with God's word. See, God, you said before you formed me in thy mother's womb, you knew me. So God, if you know me, you know what I'm going through right now. And God says, listen, I told you no weapon that form against you shall prosper. So if you see the weapon forming against you, why not get up under the weapon instead of letting the weapon get up under you? See, God says, I'm the same God yesterday, today, and forevermore. I change is not. My word is not changing. God is saying my word did not go out to you and come back to you void. See, remember God told the man who was laying by the pool of Bethesda for 38 years, what do you want? See, David went to God and says, listen, God, this is what I want. And God says, listen, because this is what you want, you got the green light to go. See, he told that man, he said, what is it that you want? The man says, listen, the people wouldn't put me in the pool. Jesus said, we're not talking about what happened in the past. We're talking about the blessing that's coming in the future. What do you want? So Jesus commanded the man to pick up his bed and walk. The lady who had the issue of blood, she says, listen, I got to do something different. This lady says, listen, I've been on top of the problem for long enough because it ain't going nowhere. Let me get up under the problem. How did she get up under the problem? The lady came from behind to get her healing. She didn't try to run through the front of the crowd. She says, listen, I'll go behind the crowd because I need to get up under some people. If I got to crawl to get to Jesus, I ain't trying to talk a whole bunch of talk to him. All I'm trying to do is touch the hem of his garment because the problem has had me for so long. Now I got to get up under it. So what God is saying is to keep trusting him. He says to keep trusting in the Lord with all your heart and lean not to your own understanding. We look at David as having this good life because we talk about David. He slew Goliath and he took a rock and he took a slingshot. But we don't talk about how David had to go through ups and downs and changes and turnarounds. We don't talk about how David went through the same process that we went through in life. But we understand is that David kept trusting God. How do you trust God? You in the field as a child, and a tiger and a bear comes to attack you. But God had you in training all the time to be able to do what you need to do. Sometimes we look at the things as a negative, but God said those things were positive in your life. See, you were mad because you was in the field. But God says, I was raising you up to be a king. If I had to put you out there with your brothers, you see, your brothers wouldn't run up on that giant. But the king that I ordained and called you to be, you knew that when I gave you the red light, it was time to leave the field and time to slay the giant. See, if I would have kept you around everybody else, Joseph, you couldn't go from the pit to the palace. See, but I moved you away from your family because you was in training to be a king in the palace. See, I understand that you went through lies, and I understand that your family wanted to kill you. But what I also understand is that I told you that before I would let a weapon form against you, I will move you out the situation. So y'all, I pray that God has spoke to each and every one of you all on this podcast tonight. Charlene, once again, thank you so much for joining in. I just begin to look, and I just begin to say, I just want to show the people life not easy. It's not. We're looking at David as the most everything I hear about David is David slew Goliath. David killed the giant. The lady even made a song. David killed 10,000. Saul killed 100,000. But 1,000. I'm 1,000. But one thing we didn't realize when she started to sing that song about how Saul only killed 1,000 and David killed 10,000, that woman started problems in David's life. When David came out that field and started talking about knocking that giant down, that caused problems in David's life. See, we never talk about the problems. We talk about the success. But what David showed you is some of your greatest success is going to be working under pressure. And you're not going to be able to backpedal in your past because your future is at stake. David showed you that I understand everything that went on in the past. David wasn't that good, but one thing David didn't have was David says, listen, I'm a man after God's own heart. And y'all, with that being said, I just wanted to come on tonight just to let you know that some of your greatest success is going to be when you're working under pressure. It's not when everything comes easy. When everything is easy for you, it's just easy. But when you have to work under pressure, you find yourself saying, I'm going to end a little bit too deep, God. What we going to do now? See, we got to start asking God, what we going to do? Because if we say it's not my will, it's your will, God, what we going to do? God, when you give me the green light, I'm going to go. God, when you say do a U-turn, I'm going to turn around. God, when you say go up, I'm going to go up. Why? Because I'm looking towards the hills for which cometh my help, because my help comes from God. And y'all, I just thank each and every one of you all on tonight. Oh, Brenda, Evangelist Brenda, thank you so much for joining in with us on tonight. Y'all, thank each and every one of y'all for joining in with me and my husband on Monday. And then we did a podcast on yesterday talking about our vision. And also today, I just thank each and every one of you all for joining in. Oh, Angenola Seawood, thank you so much. Thank you for joining in with me on tonight. Martise Porter, I seen you on here. Thank you so much for joining in with me on tonight. Marlon, thank you so much for joining in. Y'all, it's truly a blessing and it's truly exciting to see people that we grew up with that they could just partake in the word of God. I'm just coming on here tonight just to tell you all, sometimes you can't keep running with your past when your future's at stake. David messed up in the past. He acknowledged it. But one thing David says that I got to keep going because I'm in too deep now. My life is on the line. And David says, if I don't recover everything that they took, forget what they took from me. Love you too, Marlon. Forget what they took from me. These men about to stone me about their wife and kids. Oh, Father say he love you too. So, y'all, with that being said, I thank each and every one of you all on tonight. And of course, my brother as well. He say he love you too. Y'all, I thank each and every one of you all who come on here tonight with us. Tanika Johnson, thank you so much for joining in. Tanika, I hope you join in with us more often. It's truly a blessing to see you on here tonight. We do a podcast on Monday at 7:00 as well. All y'all free to join in with us Monday, Thursday, whenever we pop on. Y'all hang in there with us. Cause I was telling my husband as I talked to him on the phone today on my lunchtime. I told him, I said, sometimes you feel like you in things so deep that you can't turn around. And as we talked about on last night, for me and my husband, we in so deep with God that God has been too good to us for us to turn around. And as I look back over my life, I can look at my life as David, we all can see ourselves as kids and things didn't go right. But we had to keep moving. We had to knock the giants down. April, thank you so much for joining in with us on tonight. We had to knock the giants down that was in our way. We had to fight the tigers and we had to kill the bears, but we kept going. And from that, we had enemies based off of whatever reason. So we kept knocking them down. And I feel like I'm in so deep with God that I cannot turn around, because one thing I understand is that if God called you to it, he'll bring you through it. I always think about what he told Jeremiah. He says, listen, Jeremiah, before I knew thee, before I formed thee in the mother womb, I knew thee. And God is saying that to us because guess what? By the grace of God, each and every one of us is able to be on this podcast tonight and say, but God. We have been in some tight places in our life, but God. And I often think about Jeremiah and I says, before God formed me in my mother's womb, thank God that you decided to place me in my mother's womb because you knew me. And if God formed me in my mother's womb and he knew thee, then God nurtured me in such a way that people wouldn't understand. See, sometimes when God calls you to do certain things, everybody not gonna understand. See, David's father didn't realize the young child that you push into the field is the young child that's gonna become a king. David's father didn't realize you got a king right there in your house, but you got the king working in the field. But one thing God did was said, because the king is in the field, I'll train the king wherever he is. And see, sometimes God puts you in places where he can train you to do things that people will never be able to see, because guess what? When Saul realized that David was a young boy and knocked that giant down, Saul wanted to kill David because of what God had allowed David to do. So y'all, with that being said, April, she said, y'all get ready for what God is about to do. Yes, April, I'm ready. I'm ready. I was telling my husband, I says, he says the dynamic duo. Yes. I told my husband, I said, today, I said, I'm going to pound the pavement until I get everything that God has promised me. Because the Bible says, to him that is able to do exceedingly abundantly above more above all that you can ask or think, is what the Bible says. The Bible says, to whom much is given, much is required. And I've been talking to a couple of friends, and I was telling them that I'm sincere about what God has told me to do, me and my husband. Like, I think about, y'all, it's a funny story. I think about, I always think about me and my husband when we met, and I just look and I say, when I met him, we were kids, I think at the time when I met my husband, he was 14 at the time. I was 15. I really didn't like him when I first met him. I had to get to know him, but I never thought from that day I met him, I never seen myself with him. And you know what? God does things that you can't see. That's faith. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, evidence of things not seen. If you keep your faith in God, God will do things for you that you would never see. Now, guess what? It wasn't easy. We had a rocky road. But you know what I learned to do? I let the past be the past, because my future was at stake. See, my kids needed to see mama being whole. My kids needed to see daddy being whole. My kids needed to see mama have a healthy marriage. My kids needed to see daddy know how to love mama right. So daddy and mama decided we can't keep worrying about the shoulda, coulda, woulda. Yeah, we understand what happened, but the future is at stake. And so now daddy and mama, we on a mission for all y'all. We on a mission. Tamika, y'all know, Fuzzo and Vanessa used to act a plum fool. A plum fool. And I always think, y'all, my granddaddy used to be saying, you out there acting a bump fool. And I look back and we act the fool, and y'all know it. But God be the glory. But God saved us. God brought us out of those dark places in our life because y'all, but you know what? It's just amazing to see how God will let you have those crazy times in your life, but God also will get you and straighten you up when you need to be straightened out. So y'all, I just want to bring a little humor to y'all. One day, me and my husband, we gonna get on here and we gonna tell our story and how we met. And Tasha was with me when I met him. We was in high school, and her sister Vanetta was going with one of his friends, Henry, and he was right there with him. And y'all, it's just crazy because I didn't like him. I didn't like him at all. But y'all, it's crazy. It's really crazy. We're gonna tell y'all one day how it all started. We'll tell you. He had some clothes at my house. I didn't know who he was, but he had gave them to my cousin. And I'm just like, whose stuff is this? And my cousin said, you know that boy Fuzzo, but I really didn't know him. And he was right around the corner from me. But once I got to yeah, sure was Paris. Sure was. Henry had that little gray car. But y'all, I'm not gonna talk about this. Tasha knew. Me and Tasha and Vanetta, we used to be sneaking, doing a lot of things we had no business doing. But to God be the glory. It's good to have friends. It's good to have memories. It's good to be able to look back and laugh at your past and thank God for your future. It's good to be able, yes. We was a mess. We was a hot mess, Lord Jesus. But look at what God has us now. So y'all, we was we still a work in progress, but we better than where we was. But one day, y'all, we gonna get on here and we gonna tell y'all about that little story, how we met and how we didn't meet and how we broke up and how we divorced but never divorced and how we was just all over the place. But y'all, I just want to bring a little humor to y'all. I just want to make y'all laugh because I look at my past and I say the past is the past and thank God for the future. Lord Jesus. Bird. Look at you now. Hooked. Bird. That's my friend, y'all. But with that being said, I thank each and every one of you all for joining in with us on tonight. And like I said, I'm gonna come on here one day. We're gonna surprise y'all and we're gonna tell y'all our little story. Half of y'all probably know this little story because really we all a community. All y'all know. Bird, I want to say sprung. That was 1993, 4, 5, and 6. Yeah, but with that being said, God bless y'all. God bless y'all. And what Monique was saying, Monique always got to give us a little laugh. Cherish those memories. You know how important a moment is until it becomes a memory. That's right, Monique. We cherish those memories. Some of those memories we just try to throw on out the window, but to God be the glory, and I thank each and every one of you all. Charlene, Tamika, Monique, Colleen, Tasha, Paris. Thank you. Paris was a little boy. He was little to me. Who else on here? Monique, April. Jeffrey, thank you so much. Who else on here? Latanya, Pierre, Brenda, Angenola, Taniqua Johnson. Who else? I think I seen somebody new on here. Who was it? Their last name started with an L. Marlon. Thank you so much for joining in. I'm trying to remember your name. Charge it to my head and not my heart. I seen you on here early, but thank you. You know who you are. You know who you are. No, her name started. Last name was Liz. Trinity Lyons. Thank you. Thank you so much. But this the prayer line that I be on. Yeah. Oh, okay. You know what? My friend Bird has started getting on that too, Colleen Banks. So now you see Colleen Banks, you'll know who she is. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Latanya. Latanya put me on with her prayer line, so I'll be on there too talking. With that being said, I thank each and every one of you all on tonight. And until Monday, y'all be blessed.
Support this podcast by sending a cash donation via Cash App at $VANLUC, and thank you for your support.